Hi, this is Professor David Bouguet. I have the privilege of interviewing one of my former students who's now risen high in the ranks of a corporation, and she actually works in the supply chain. And so we were talking, and I thought, okay, this is a perfect situation to talk about in the supply chain because she does the actual where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. She's the one that you turn to get the job done. So, with that, Esmeralda, you are wonderful and fabulous from my perspective. But why don't you tell us about yourself and about what you do?
Right. So I currently am a purchasing manager and I work the supply chain for a medical device company out here in Irvine. I've been in the supply chain for a total of 17 and a half years now. I started really young. And I've been able to kind of just work on getting those relationships. And what it is really maintaining supplier relationships and building those to become supplier partnerships to be able to establish a good flow of supply chain and avoid any types of disruptions for manufacturing. So I actually wanted to share one of the most recent negotiations that we did in our supply chain and just kind of walk you through the process of what we did and how we identified it and worked through the situation. So the biggest one that we realized was we realized that in order for a company, and one of the things we manage is cost of goods, right? In order for a company to be profitable, the raw material cost of goods needs to be uh, considered. And one of the things that we were realizing was, hey, our cost of goods is too high, limiting our ability to have a profit margin on our product. There were several problems that we identified. Was the first problem was the component is a critical component. It's not something that we can do and just kind of get rid of. This is a custom product, meaning that it is made specifically only for our company. There is no other component similar to it on market. And the formulation, because it's a specific formula, is made for us. So that makes it, that goes into sole sourcing. Sole sourcing is very critical because a component itself is sole source. It means that you don't have the option to go from one supplier to another supplier. And if your manufacturer or supplier knows that that is the case, then they typically will ramp up pricing, stating that they know you can't go anywhere else to get the product. So we had four problems. Our cost was too high. The component was a critical component for a consumable. It was a custom product and it was sole sourced. When we looked at the problem, we looked at how do we want to approach this? So then you think about what tactic is the best one for the specific consumable. So what we did was we did some market research. We looked at our competitor pricing and we worked backwards. So what is our competitor selling the same type of product essentially for? And we kind of looked at what are the components that might go or ingredients that go into that consumable. And then we ballparked what we estimated they were paying for the product to use that in our negotiations. So then the next approach was to get we went and we scheduled a business meeting with the manufacturer supplier. The first thing you want to do with these suppliers is build a common area, right? Then I think I reached out to you, Professor, and I said, hey, I need some help. I'm working on this big negotiation. I'm not really sure how I should approach this one because it is so critical to us and I just really can't make any, harsh decisions here. And you did say, hey, make it so that it's beneficial to both of us. So the first thing is to kind of establish that common area. We've been working with this partner for a little over 9 years now. So they've been with us since development. And in development stages, typically cost of goods is going to be higher because you're buying really small volumes for testing and manufacturing. So they kind of maintained that price when we went into manufacturing and made it really hard for us to backtrack on pricing. So we sold them on, hey, right now we're no longer doing development work, we're hitting market. So market is going to mean that we have ramp up instead of us looking at short-term business goals, which might be from, now till the end of this year, we're looking at a 3-year plan. So we established a 3-year plan and we said, look, this is our expected ramp up at each quarter, meaning that we would like to partner with you guys to have that ramp up. If we sell more and we have that ability for the ramp up, then that means you gain more growth as well and more profit from the sales. So that's really the approach that we ended up doing. We did play a little bit of hardball, basically saying, unfortunately, if you can't work with us, then we have to do some extensive work to do some more development work to bring on another supplier. And that was only to kind of get them to understand, hey, we did research, we're already talking to some other suppliers and considering that if you're not able to meet us halfway and reach this goal, then we might have to take that approach. And that means you will only have made it for these specific and the way we talk about it for consumables, and we're developing another 13. So that means they're limited to just making profit on 4 consumables. And then when we go into the new iteration or the new phase of these consumables, you guys will no longer be our partner of preference. And we will work with someone else that can kind of say, so giving them that establishing, hey, you have the opportunity to grow with additional portfolios, versus limiting them to what they had, and giving them the bigger picture of telling them there's more business opportunity if we partner now for long term versus just a short term. Hey, what can I make now? Because the one thing that sales always kind of has is they're looking at what am I going to receive in the mail every month or every quarter, right? Because they make commissions. And sometimes it also has to do when you're just dealing with the sales team, they're just looking at the commission, and you want to kind of bring and involve the right people. So what we did is in a business meeting, we find out who is, for example, the director of sales, who is the director of operations, who knows how these products move and manufacture through the product line, that can kind of help us identify where we can look at this might be a better volume for you guys because we're more efficient and we can produce more. And if you guys can hit this volume, then we can actually reduce your cost. So those conversations were very much intriguing. I went ahead and I involved a specific, we brought on a member that was a CEO at a competitor company for the same company that we had. So they did some consulting for us to kind of just tell us, hey, the market really, this is what the product is. This is really what the market cost is, because they have that notion. And we brought on our legal team, who also facilitated kind of starting to establish and build a supplier agreement. The supplier agreement basically is what's going to hold you to agree a contract of doing not only the cost of the material, you can also do a forecast in there, volumes, and that kind of builds some security around your supply chain to ensure that you're going to receive the material on a consistent basis without it having any disruptions, and you're always going to have your best cost of goods.
So a couple of things. Let's go back. You originally had this company. It's been around for 9 years. So your company already has a solid relationship, and it sounds like it's a comfortable one.
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
Now, what did you do? Did you already work with them for a couple of years? Did you know the people personally?
So I actually started here at this company 3 years ago, meaning that the relationship was pre-established before I was here, and it was already, that's how they were established as our sole source, because they were the ones that were with the company at the initiation, and they were the ones that produced the raw material for us. And
Okay.
so it was a little harder to even consider doing any of the dual sourcing that we typically do for most of our components. I think that also should always be something that is considered during development, because if you are testing 2 materials at the same time and you have 2 suppliers that are identified as being able to produce similar product, and you go to market, right? Because some of the products that we saw are regulated, whether it be FDA regulated or EU regulated, you need to meet the regulations. And so whatever you submit, that's what gets approved. I think
Okay. So they came
having
on
that
board
ability.
early, and by coming on board early, they expected to make more money, and you actually didn't mind paying the money because you're getting small volume. And
Yes.
then they just kind of stuck with that same thing because they knew they were sole source.
Yeah, they knew that they had been the only vendor that we submitted when we went and did the approvals. So they were very sure of, hey, we're the only one that's providing this for them. So the price is really not going to be an issue because we can only get it from them.
Okay.
So had it have been my ability to be here a few years earlier, I may have advised development team to say, hey, let's look at 2 or 3 options. I think one of the biggest and strongest things that you can do when managing your supply chain is you always get 3 bids. That is my minimum. 3 bids, because then you can really kind of gauge not only the product quality, but the cost. And you can kind of present a cost analysis to the team before we decide and kind of focus on what supplier we're going to use.
So you normally have multiple suppliers on almost every single product. On this one, because it's uniqueness and they were part of the approval process. Okay, you were
Yes,
between a rock and they thought they had a bond on the contract no matter what. But you lined up all the big guns behind it. You talked about legal. You talked about a different competitor. I'll bet you probably mentioned a couple of things like that during negotiations.
we
And
did.
okay, and then you got then you worked your muscles all up and showed them how strong you were and everything else. And you're going to, and it worked.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's what we did. We made sure that we brought on the right people on the team. And we confidently said, hey, we know you guys are the only sole source for this product for the 3 or 4 ones that we already had developed. But this is what we're projecting, and this is our growth. So basically, we sold our own company to them, saying there's 13 more pipelines expected in the next 2 years. So that means you guys need to be able to support these, and you guys have the opportunity to be the main supplier for these other components if you can really match us and we can partner to get a good cost that's not only profitable to us, but also to you.
Did you show them the potential revenue projections you're anticipating with the new products?
So we did not share the revenue projections. We didn't share the growth. And what I ended up doing was the cost. I did 2 cost analysis. I did current cost at, for example, 2022 pricing and the volumes that we did, and then what we expected on volumes. And then I did, hey, here's a cost that we can comfortably agree to. This is what you would look at in total sales. So it did show them what they would be able to sell us and what their profit margins would be
So,
if
so
they.
okay, in basketball terms, what you did is called the full court press. You started at one end and you says, okay, here's what's going to happen. Bad things will happen. And by the way, at the other end of the court, we have this fabulous carrot over here. It'll be wonderful. We can be together, and Nirvana will break out, and we'll all be happy.
Yep, we dangled the carrot. We basically also stated what we were willing to pay. And then we got them to agree to it. It was not hard. I mean, typically I was really expecting this to be harder back and forth, but then that showed us, hey, they really had a big profit margin on our products when they were able to reduce it. We got a reduction of about 68% on the two main
68%.
components.
Okay.
68, yeah.
Hopefully, a good portion of that goes into your paycheck. Cool.
Bonuses are around the corner.
Okay, cool. Congratulations. What did you think was the most challenging thing? Was the most challenging thing meeting with them or anticipating meeting with them?
I think the most challenging thing was really coming up with what tactic we wanted to use to reach out to the vendors, because no one negotiation is going to be the same. And it's really what you're trying to establish when it comes to supply chain. What is the issue and how do you approach it? I think my biggest hurdle to kind of leap over was they were very confident in the fact that they knew that they were my only source of supply. Therefore, they knew they can basically gauge the cost to whatever they wanted to, and I was going to have to kind of cave to it because I can't run manufacturing. And I had to prove to them that if they continued to do these price increases or maintain the cost at a high market, I was not going to be able to use them in the future, right? So they were only going to be used for maybe 1 more year. I think that was the hardest thing. And because these components are so unique, and I can't share a lot of it, but it's like a special formulation. I like to say it's a potion kind of thing that comes together. um, it's hard to source it elsewhere and to validate. It takes a lot of time. It takes almost a year and a half of development work or 2 years to come up with something that we can use.
So you did a lot of homework and you prepared heavily before you even
Yes,
talked to them. Okay,
we
and so you
prepared
lined up.
for.
You had all your arguments already lined up. You figure out what their arguments would be. You had stuff already to the point you actually had legal counsel involved if you ever needed it. You had some serious stuff ready to go into negotiations. And instead of them fighting, they realized, okay, she's prepared. And so fine, they agreed to it. And it's a huge, massive cost reduction, except for the fact they're anticipating making the money they lost in negotiations and much more. So you actually did the positive, you won them over, and then you sat there and provided incentive. Okay,
Yeah, that's
nice.
what we did. It was actually one of my best ones. I mean, there's a few other ones. There's some other crazy things I've done. There was a component that was a limiting factor that we had that actually did bring my operations down. And I will say supply chain is complex in the aspect that the component itself that was missing was not a complex component, but because of, for example, when we were going through COVID, there was not enough of, it's a specific chip that we bought. The vendor, the manufacturer couldn't obtain. So there's other tactics that we did. We said, hey, we have some resources that we could potentially use. Maybe we can locate that specific chip that you're needing. I went as far as finding out who the CEO was and reaching out to the CEO directly, and then was able to get some of the materials to come in. It's just supply chain varies very where you're at. And I think one of the biggest things that I always say is if you have the will, you have a way, you can figure it out. Um, it can happen.
Now, let me change topics just for a little bit. You like your job, don't you?
I love my job. The biggest thing about my job that I'd say I love is that it's never the same case every day, right? Everything changes. Right before I had this conversation, someone walked in and we're talking about another component that's also very custom that we have to look at. Hey, there's a new additional lead time because there needs to be testing before it can be released to us. That wasn't initially gauged in the quoting process. So those things change, and you just have to be able to pivot from one day to another quite
And
quickly.
now we have a thing called artificial intelligence, and it's eating up jobs left and right. I suspect that you've already thought about it. Do you have any worries about that, or do you think it's going to be a major help to you?
I'm not worried about AI. I think you can use the tools to basically, maybe do some forecasting, but supply chain is one of those that you really never know what's going to happen because there's a bunch of other things that can impact it. For example, we talked about COVID. We talked about the pricing, right? Maybe pricing you can look at, but it's all depending on what the market is going and then what other external events are happening. A war can really make a big impact. Like if you look at if you have, I've talked to some of my colleagues, they talked about, hey, we had 80% of our business coming from a Ukrainian customer with a component that we manufactured in Russia. So when the war broke out, that company shut down. I mean, 80% of the business was going to that Ukrainian customer, but they weren't wanting to take any Russian built manufacturing components. So it's a world turn of events. And the only way to really put the measures is putting risk mitigations on your components. I have developed a 7 risk criteria for my components. And based on that, then that's how I gauge what kind of uh, we'd work on how do we approach this one specific component? What measures do we need to put in place for that? Do we need to have dual sourcing, or is it something that's simple? Like if it's a screw nut and bolt, I mean, I can get it from McMaster, right?
Oh,
So it's just really gauging your components and aligning the risk around them to be able to put measures and controls. Yeah,
this has been very informative. Like, oh my gosh, and you have no idea. I'm very proud of you. If I can have a
thank
little
you.
bit of credit, yeah, who cares? You're doing fabulous, and you're doing super in your job. And congratulations on great negotiations. You
Thank
learned
you.
a lot of skills from your experience too. It's like so,
Yeah.
so and part of it, it seems like your love of the work itself really compelled you to do a really fabulous job on this.
I think so. I think you really have to care. In supply chain, you have to care because if you don't, it might not make a difference. And I think one of the biggest things that we really work on is making sure we don't just build relationships, you want to build partnerships. So you start off with the relationship, you build the person, you understand their capacity, but building a partnership and ensuring that both sides understand that it's a beneficial business move, that's going to make a big difference. And maintaining those relationships with whoever your reps are or internal teams, quality, different products have different requirements for relationships, but maintaining those is really going to get you out of a pinch sometimes.
Okay, super.
Yeah,
All right. Well, Esmeralda, thank you very much. You're going to
thank you.
probably inspire a lot of our class. It's certainly appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, if they
Hey,
ever want to talk to me, I'm available. And then I think we have some internships in the summer too. Maybe
okay.
one of them might be interested.
Super. All right. I
All
like it.
right.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.